Who's ready to bake a cake today? This one is so delicious and it's so simple you don't even need your mixer. Jump in and make this vanilla sour cream cake with me today. Hi, I'm Mary Catherine and welcome to my table. I'm really glad you're here today. This is going to be a yummy treat. We're going to make this delicious vanilla sour cream cake. And if you watched my video that had like the 3 chocolate desserts on it, if you remember that Texas 22-minute cake that we made, this one is very similar to that, except it's not chocolate. Even the measurements are almost alike. There's just a slight difference between them, but it's going to taste very much like that, but it's the vanilla version instead of a chocolate one. It's delicious. So let's get started. What we're going to do is we're going to take 2 sticks of butter and put it in our saucepan. I added 1 cup of water to the pan, and we're just going to let it heat up enough to get that butter melted, and that's all that we need to do with this. So we can leave it with that water. We don't have to sit here and stir this or anything. So while it is heating that butter up to melt it, we're going to start putting together some of the dry ingredients in our bowl over here. And we're going to start with 2 cups of flour, and you don't have to sift this or anything. This is one of those recipes, you do want to be as precise as you can, but it's very forgiving. So we're not even going to sift. We're not going to be super precise. I'm just going to kind of use my finger and level this off. And we're going to start with 2 1/4 cups of flour. That's just a little more flour than we used in that chocolate cake, if you'll remember, but very similar. There's 2. And then I'm not even going to get my 1/4 cup out. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it in here. Be about as close as I can. That's probably about 1/4. And then we want 2 cups of sugar. There's 1. And there's 2. And then we're going to take some baking soda. And we're going to add about 1 teaspoon. So there's our baking soda. And then we're going to do salt. And we only need about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. That's probably about half. Okay, and that's all of our dry ingredients. And I'm just going to kind of use my whisk and just give it a quick little whisk while that butter and water are continuing to melt together over there. That looks like a pretty good texture right there. So we've got it ready for when our butter is finished. So let's check on it. Oh yes, it's melting nicely. Probably a couple more minutes and it'll be ready. And then we'll add it together with our dry ingredients and then a few more things right at the end. While our butter is almost finished, we're going to go ahead and get our pan ready. Today, I'm going to use a bundt pan to bake this cake in because I want it to be pretty. We're going to have some people over for lunch tomorrow, so I want it to look pretty. This cake recipe, you actually would bake in a long flat pan, kind of like a jelly roll pan, or a cookie sheet that has little sides on it. It's a long flat cake, but I've done it before in the bundt pan, and I want it to look a little bit pretty tomorrow. So I'm going to do it in this, and I'm going to prepare my pan just by spraying it with the baking spray. Be sure it's the baking spray, not just the regular cooking spray. This has the flour in it too. I always kind of hold mine over my sink to catch any extra spray. All right, and there you go. We've got our pan ready. Now let's check on that butter. Oh yes, perfect. It's just melted because I had checked on it right before I sprayed and there was still a little bit left to melt. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to pour this directly into this bowl with our flour and sugar mixture and other dry ingredients. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick mix now before we add those last few things. That looks pretty good. So we want to add a splash of vanilla, probably about a teaspoon or 2. I don't ever measure vanilla, do y'all? I'll probably do it a little bit on the generous side. And then we're going to add our sour cream. And we want about 1/2 cup in this recipe. So I've got my 1/2 cup measure here. I'm just going to add this to our bowl. And then the last ingredient is 2 eggs. So let's add our 2 eggs. Now I want to be careful. I'm not cracking these over a bowl separately this time, so let's be sure I don't get any shells in there. Okay, looks good, except the big one. We'll pull it out. And the reason I wanted to go ahead and stir it up a little bit first before I added these eggs is because that liquid from the butter melting into the water was so hot. I didn't want it to land directly on that because it kind of cooks your eggs a little bit before you can get them mixed in, and we do not want that. So I wanted to mix it a little bit first so that it wasn't as hot and wouldn't start cooking those eggs. And that's it. Now, we'll just take our pan and we'll just pour it directly into our pan. I'm going to scrape it down so we can get all of that goodness out. And now we've got our cake ready to go in the oven. I've got the oven preheated to 350 degrees, and we're going to bake this for about 35 minutes, and then we're going to come back and check it. I think it's going to be about ready then. All right. It's been 35 minutes, so let's check our cake. Woo! Yes, that looks perfect. Yeah, you can see where when I kind of put my finger in, it doesn't sink into it. It just kind of bounces, and that's exactly what you want. So our cake is ready. We're going to let it cool, and then we're going to make a really delicious icing to go on top. Our cake has cooled, so it's time to make the icing. I've got 1 stick of butter here in the pan starting to melt, and while it melts, I'm going to add to it some evaporated milk. We want about 6 tablespoons of evaporated milk, which is really going to be about, I've got 1/4 of a cup here. So 1/4 of a cup is 4 tablespoons. And so then we'll do half again, and that's going to give us 6 tablespoons of our evaporated milk. And just as soon as this butter melts, then we'll pull it off the heat and add the rest of our ingredients. We're going to add some powdered sugar. We're going to add a splash of vanilla and just a pinch of salt. Not much salt, just enough to kind of balance out the sweetness of the icing. I'm just going to make sure it's good and warm. So I'm going to leave it on for just a little bit longer. I can see the steam starting to rise out of the pan. Don't necessarily want it to boil, but we just want to be sure it's good and hot. And everything will come together very nicely then. I'm just going to pull it off the heat, and we'll start adding. We're going to use 4.5 cups of powdered sugar. There's 2, 3, 4, and let's get about 1/2. Not that much. And then I'm going to go ahead now and just add a splash of our vanilla, probably about 1 teaspoon or 2. And then I'm going to sprinkle in our salt, just a little, just really a pinch. I'll kind of show you in my hand. Really, that is enough. That's probably not even 1/8 of a teaspoon. I'll start mixing slowly until the powdered sugar gets incorporated better. And there again, you don't need your mixer for this. Everything about this cake is so simple. You can just do it with a bowl and a whisk, or here, your pan and a whisk for the icing. Okay, and it does take a little bit of mixing with this. We just want to be sure all those lumps are out of our powdered sugar really well. You can sift the powdered sugar if you want to. And sometimes if I feel like I have a batch of powdered sugar that's really lumpy, I do that. This one wasn't too bad, so I think we'll be fine just to use our whisk here in the pan. I think I'm going to go back. It still looks pretty runny, and it does at first, but I think I'm going to add just a smidge more powdered sugar to thicken it up a little bit more. I think that's going to be a little bit better consistency. Okay, and looks like all our lumps are out. And I like that consistency a little bit better. So now, let's go over here to our cake. And so I'm just going to pour it over it. Now, when you use, the sheet pan or the jelly roll pan, whatever you use to bake this in, if you don't use a bundt pan, I know that you need all of this icing. I'm not sure we'll use it all for this bundt cake. I like it to spill over the way that it is, but I think this is going to be a little too much for this. So I probably could have cut this recipe in half when I make the cake in a bundt pan. But when you have it in a long sheet pan, you would want this whole recipe. I'll pour a little extra here in the middle. I don't think we need all that still. Okay, look how pretty that looks with the icing spilling over and around the cake. Doesn't that look delicious? I bet it's going to taste yummy tomorrow. I just know it is. So that's our vanilla sour cream pound cake. It's really moist inside, and it's going to be so yummy. I just know it is. You're going to love that flavor. I think it's going to taste very much like that chocolate Texas cake that we make, but this is just the vanilla version, and of course we did it in a bundt pan. So I hope you'll give it a try today. Thank you so much for joining me today at Mary Catherine's Table. I'm really glad you were with us. If you like this content, be sure to subscribe and make those notifications come to you when we put out new videos. We're coming out with new videos every week, and we'd love to have you come along with us. And remember, find somebody today who needs a little bit of kindness and give them some of yours.